John Stott, in his The Message of Acts, the Spirit, the Church, and the World, we have reached Rome with the Apostle Paul. And this section is subtitled The Arrival in Rome. It covers Acts 28, verses 11 to 16. After 3 months we put out to sea in a ship that had wintered in the island. It was an Alexandrian ship with the figurehead of the twin gods Castor and Pollux. We put in at Syracuse and stayed there 3 days. From there we set sail and arrived at Rhegium. The next day the south wind came up, and on the following day we reached Puteoli. There we found some brothers who invited us to spend a week with them, and so we came to Rome. The brothers there had heard that we were coming, and they traveled as far as the Forum of Appian and the 3 taverns to meet us. At the sight of these men, Paul thanked God and was encouraged, and when we got to Rome, Paul was allowed to live by himself with a soldier to guard him. To which John Stott comments, the shipwrecked men spent the 3 months of winter on the island, perhaps from mid-November to mid-February. By then, navigation would be beginning again, and they were ready to board their 3rd ship, another Alexandrian vessel, which had itself wintered in one of Malta's safe harbors. Its carved and painted figurehead was a representation of the Dioskuroi, that is, the twin brothers, or the heavenly twins, namely Castor and Pollux, who in Greco-Roman mythology were the sons of Jupiter, that is Zeus, the gods of navigation and patrons of seafarers. Luke makes use of his log again and plots the remaining part of the journey to Rome by sea and land in 4 stages. First, they sailed from Malta in a northeasterly direction to Syracuse, the capital of Sicily, where they stayed 3 days. Secondly, they sailed further north and put in at Rhegium, on the toe of Italy. The phrase made a circuit in the Revised Standard Version, or sailed around in the New English Bible, probably means that the winds made a zigzag course, or tacking necessary. Thirdly, the next day they sailed on with the benefit of a southerly wind and made such excellent progress that by the following day they had traveled the approximately 200 miles to Puteoli, which is on the Gulf of Naples. Here they stayed a week with some Christian brothers and sisters, possibly while Julius was awaiting final instructions regarding his prisoners. The 4th lap of the journey was by land, not sea. After only a few miles they will have joined the famous Appian Way, which led straight north to Rome, and which Richard Longnecker has called the oldest, straightest, and most perfectly made of all the Roman roads. Christians in Rome had heard of their coming, however, and a delegation set out to meet Paul and his party. Some of them traveled the 30 or more miles to the 3 taverns, while others persevered a further 10 miles to the market town called the Forum of Appian. Being Roman place names, the New English Bible is right to spell them Tres Tabernae and Appii Forum. It must have been an emotional experience for Paul to meet personally the first residents in the city of his dreams and the first members of the church to which he had addressed his great theological and ethical treatise. By the way, he'd written that a couple of years before this. It's not surprising that at the sight of them he thanked God and took courage. They then escorted him back along the Appian Way by which they had come. On arrival, Luke tells us that Paul was accorded custodia militaris, which permitted him to live in his own lodgings while remaining under the surveillance of a Roman soldier, to whom he was chained by the right wrist. The Western text inserts before this, however, that the centurion delivered the prisoners to the stratopedarch, never seen that word before, which the New Greek translation, the BAGD, translates military commandant of a camp. There's been much discussion as to who this was. It used to be thought that the stratopedarchos was the prefect, the commander of the Praetorian or Imperial Guard, who had responsibility for provincial prisoners, and was at that time a man named Afranius Burrus. But according to Sherwin White, the expert on Roman law, the most likely identification is with the officer known as Princeps Castrorum, the head administrator of the officium of the Praetorian Guard. for this official is the person most likely to be in executive control of prisoners awaiting trial at Rome. It was such attention to details as Luke's attention in this chapter 28 and in the previous chapter on the shipwreck that caused William Ramsay, who was at the time not a believer at all, attending at Oxford University and setting himself for a life in archaeology. It was these details that caused William Ramsay to reconsider his view of the New Testament and finally become a believer himself. He became a believer primarily because he studied the book of Acts, the writings of Luke, and decided that only a worthy historian, a trustworthy historian, could explain the geographical and historical details of the writings of Luke and the book of Acts were so trustworthy. So Ramsay's testimony, I'll put a link onto our video about what Ramsay later did with his life. See you soon.